Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another Coach Talk. Hopefully, you all have been enjoying this series as much as I have. I know that this type of conversation for me is one that I've always enjoyed. Had several people on my positive talks that were coaches. Now I get to do coach talks with coaches specifically. You all are enjoying these. I know that a lot of people are journeying into working with coaches to help them move towards goals. So hopefully you all can meet some of the coaches I know. Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Already had a couple calls this morning, so I'm all ready.
You're ready to go. It's earlier here.
Yeah, yes, it is for you over there. And is it still super wintry and cold up where you're at?
It is. It's rainy and a little cold, but no snow.
Yeah, if it's raining, it's warming up a little because I know when we were doing Launchpad, it was quite cold for you guys up there in Canada.
It was, yes. And there was a few of you that were in really nice climates. I know. I remember
Well,
some of you were like, "Oh, I'm just going to head to the beach after class." I'm like, "Wonderful."
sounds nice. I've got like this make-believe jungle that makes it look a lot warmer than it is. It's a little colder outside, but inside it's a jungle.
What's the weather like over there?
I would say right now we're probably sitting in the 30s, 40s Fahrenheit, so not too bad.
Okay. Well, I like
But
your jungle. I like the
thank
background.
you. Well, I will let you introduce yourself so people know who you are, and then we can jump into a conversation.
Hi everyone. This is so exciting. I'm a little bit nervous, but also really excited. Uh, I am a solution-oriented coach who recently graduated from the Jay Shetty Certification School, and I met Ben through there. What a blessing. I'm so happy that we were in the same class together. Oh my God, I couldn't imagine if I never got the opportunity to meet you.
Aw,
Um, yeah. I've actually wanted to do coaching for a really long time and decided to uh, jump in last year, and it's actually been the best experience. So, what I do is I'm definitely solution focused. So, I believe in outcomes, I believe in possibilities versus problems. Um, yep, I love to look at the possibilities, the positive sides of everything, and really tapping back into the core of ourself. So, that's really what I enjoy doing.
awesome. Yeah, I love it because one of the things that kept coming up in spaces where we were talking was like different methods of coaching and different approaches. And I know that you chose different words for like solution-based coaching when it came to like some people sharing some of their like diving into feelings and all of those types of things. And you're like, I'm more driven towards the solutions than the emotions of it. So talk a little bit about like your journey into becoming a coach and like what kind of gave you that perspective in life to kind of work towards solutions instead of focusing on the
Yeah.
problems.
I think this comes down to my childhood and then the way that I grew up. Without going into too much detail, I am pretty much self-raised, and I feel where my niche started to come through was really relying on yourself,
Yeah.
I think. Yes. And so being self-raised, I think it teaches you a lot of ways on how to build on those possibilities or build on things that you can or have to do versus dwelling in the problem of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like if we switch our mindset to the possibilities instead of all the reasons why we can't do something, the outcome becomes a lot more positive and a lot more direction focused and a lot more um, what word am I looking for? A lot more beneficial in the long run.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think it's interesting because when it comes to like me personally, like I am a wear my emotions on my sleeve. I am a very deep diving, like I will sit there in emotions. And that was like one of the things when I worked in retail. Anytime things got too emotional, people would pass it over to me because they're like, oh, he deals with that. That's not something we deal with. And like when you and I talked, I was like, yeah, like one of the things I like to dive into is like how someone feels about this and like the emotions that they're going through. And yeah, I think understanding and being able to collaborate with yourself first is really important because there have been several situations in life where I put a little bit too much trust or too much of my foundation of my goals on someone else. And it brought me to the outcome where they pulled out and it kind of had my whole structure crumble because
Mhm.
I was just like, well, I wasn't expecting that to happen. And I think that it's really important. I'm still on the journey of learning how to kind of create goals by myself, for myself, and not put other people in a position where if they chose to leave, that all the hard work I've put into something kind of crumbles.
Yeah, and I really love that you say that actually. And I love your approach to coaching because for someone like me who is very driven and solution focused, you don't necessarily sit in the emotions all the time. And I feel like you do need that. And so having a coach like you is going to be really beneficial for someone like me because I do need to stop sometimes and
Mm,
really check back in with myself. But you can't necessarily always do that alone. Right?
yeah,
And so for me, I would need a coach like you
yeah.
to
And
get back to the woo
it's
woo.
it's fun because like I think sometimes when people think of coaches, they think that we've got it all together and that we don't need help from other people. And I even had a conversation with someone this morning where they're like, "Oh, I don't need to tell you any of this. You already know it." And I'm like, "No, it's like tell me. I absorb information as well. We're human. We're not perfect. And just because we're sitting here coaching as a profession doesn't mean that we aren't also seeking coaches to help us grow in areas where we're not currently excelling in. And for me, I've noticed that sometimes my emotions can get in the way of me moving towards a solution. So, like talking to you as a coach, where it's like solution oriented, sometimes you do have to kind of put your emotions down and really focus on a solution because if you get too emotional, if you allow the like your emotions to control every decision you make, that can lead you down a road so far away from the goal you're trying to get to, where there's just some spaces where it's like, okay, this is not the space and time for the emotions. This is the solution focused conversation. Let's do this. We can talk about emotions later.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I feel like I do in my coaching style. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back, recenter ourselves. Now, what's your goal?
Yeah.
What do you want to achieve? What's stopping you? Let's go, you know? And then outside of that, then we can have the tears.
Yes. Outside of the coaching therapy things that are happening out there, let's exist here and focus on the one problem we signed up to get to. Because I think for me personally, like a lot of times when I'm working on goals by myself without a coach or
Mhm.
without people assisting me, like I can focus really, really well on something, but as soon as overwhelm comes in, when it comes to running into an obstacle where it's like, I have no clue how to overcome this current challenge, like my emotions are the first thing that come into play, where it's just like, oh my gosh, the dread, oh my gosh, this is not what I was expecting. And I have to kind of slowly pull myself in and be like, okay, like emotions aren't going to get you past this obstacle. Let's be solution focused. Let's look at the things that are going to help us get over this. What skills do I have that I can try in this instant to try to overcome this? Or who can I reach out to kind of find resources to help me overcome this? Because I'm probably not going to do it alone.
Right. And then so for me it's completely opposite because I'm so goal driven. I'm go, go, go. But I lose focus. And so I feel like I actually need to bring some emotion into it. You know, I need to do things with intention and heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So, so yeah, so I enjoy working with coaches like yourself because it helps to tap back into that space where you're like, okay, hold on a second, let's bring some more heart into it, right? Let's tap back into where we need to be, and then go out with the intention. So yeah, I mean, and look how much we learn from our clients too. I mean, every conversation, you know.
yeah, I always tell people like when I go into different sessions, like I come out with probably just as much information that I can apply to my own journey as the clients do when we walk out. Because it's not so much like us going into a session and just pouring out advice. Like this is an ongoing conversation of getting someone to self-reflect and
Yeah.
like put order to their thoughts. I think that's a big thing when people are thinking of, do I want to work with a coach? Do I want to work with a mentor? Do I want to work with a therapist? Like coaches are kind of like think tanks for people. Like we're here to have conversations and connect dots. We're not so much connecting to your past and going through all of that. We're not going to prescribe you any type of medication. We can't do that.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times as coaches, we're not able to be mentors because a lot of times we haven't worked in the realm or area that this person's trying to move towards with their goals.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started off as mentor and I came into the program with the mentoring in my background. And going into coaching, which completely shifts and it's a completely different direction, it actually kind of stunted me at first, and I didn't really know what to do. I actually remember going into my first couple of sessions and being like a complete robot because I removed that mentoring part of me completely, like, oh no, you got to go sit over there, and I became a robot, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the beautiful thing about coaches, because going through any type of program that's structured and tells you how to do certain things, like we strip a little bit of ourselves away to
Mhm.
kind of go through the journey that we're being taken down through courses, schools, whatever program we're going through. But then we have to remember to like reconnect back to ourselves because like the ability to connect to people through mentoring is also a great tool for coaching. You may not be mentoring them in a realm that you're familiar with, but like there's aspects of being a mentor that work really well for coaches. Just like there are coaches that have been therapists or counselors
Mhm.
where it's like, okay, in this specific area, I'm a coach. And as a coach, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah,
And we just have to kind of navigate that because I mean, I coach coaches, so there's a little bit of mentoring in that as well.
there
But
is.
I'm sitting in the position where I'm like, okay, I want you to create a coaching career that's there for you. I don't want you to try to mimic mine because it's not going to serve you as well as if you took the time to build something that really is meant for you as a coach.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, with coaching, it's so important to not place yourself in the shoes of the client. And so the whole mentoring, is a complete separate thing. I 100% agree with you. And I think, with everything we do as coaches, it does come back to ourselves, how we want to show up, what type of coach we want to be, how can we serve our clients in the most authentic and genuine way. And this really comes down to us and our core DNA. Who are we?
Yeah,
I don't feel like coaching is something you can fake.
yeah. Yeah, this is definitely not the realm where it's like you've got all the questions and all the answers and can just exist in a space. Like I've going through this program, I've connected with people who are like, all I really want is just like a guidebook that tells me everything I'm supposed to do and say. And I'm like, you picked the wrong profession. I don't think
Yeah.
this is going to be the one for you because if you try to do a very scripted thing like that, it's going to come across very inauthentic and disconnected from the person sitting in front of you. Because unfortunately, when you're working with people, we're complex beings on this planet. Like, there isn't going to be a book that serves everyone.
No, there isn't. And I don't believe that there is ever been one book that's being created. How to be the perfect coach. You know, like the best selling, the one that has made every coach into a multi-billionaire. I have never found that book. And yep, I think, you know, doing self-reflections too, it is really important. I mean, if I was to just become a coach without ever having done this program, I don't even know where that would have taken me.
Yeah,
I really don't. You know, like just the competencies and just the basic fundamentals, but like the self-reflection in itself is so important.
yeah. I think that that's one of the things that I try to always do before I go on a call with a client is like center myself, reconnect with self, because I'm not going to show up as my best self if I'm not connected to something here first.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, if we're so focused on hoping that one day someone's going to write a book for us, we're kicking ourselves by thinking that we're not going to be good enough already to show up as a coach in that
What
situation.
is
I
Instagram
think,
saying you're right, Ben? Instagram is saying that is right.
oh, I love it. Oh, but yeah, I think that when it comes to connecting with yourself, it's just trusting yourself. And even coming into something like this, doing a live, it's just like, do you trust yourself enough to come into a space and just exist as you, knowing that you are enough and that every reality and perspective that you have is a like a very valid perspective.
Mhm.
It may be different than mine or the people watching, but it's always going to be valid. And when it comes to being a coach, it's all about validating the perspectives, but sharing new ways of kind of looking at things.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, it's funny because I I always see these quotes on align with people who are the same as you, surround yourself with people who are the same as you, and it's always, you know, aligning with the same. And in my mind, when I see these or when I think about it, it what I get from it is like the blind leading the blind.
Hmm.
And I love connecting with people that have opposing views to my own, or someone who's different or has a different perspective or a different style or a different way of doing things, because I feel like I learn so much more than just everyone is on the exact same route. I mean, ultimately we're on the same path of,
Yeah.
you know, higher self and things, but we do it in different ways. But if we were all doing the exact same thing in the exact same way at the exact same time, then it's just the blind leading the blind.
Yeah. And I love that though, because like to be able to do that, like what you're saying that you do, like you have to have a level of confidence in yourself to hear someone say that the way that you're thinking and seeing the world is not the only way. You have to have like a level of confidence as well as a level of open mindedness to share a space. Because I mean, we live in a world where places are very divided. People have very strong opinions, and to hold space for people who have a different view than you and hold it in a respectful space is not the easiest thing to do. So, a lot of times when someone says something, there's a lot of people with very strong opinions that oppose that person's view, but to be able to hold space for that and still be able to respect one another is a very intense skill that not a lot of people have.
No, and it is intense, Ben. You're right. It is intense. You know, and I watch things, I'm not going to say what, but I do watch things um just to check my ego.
Hmm.
I will watch deep opposing views. We won't mention names,
Yes.
but just so I can tap into my ego side and to you know, see if there is any valid points that come from such things or such opposing views, you know.
Yeah.
And also, when listening to these things, it makes me validate myself more. Where, no, I think what I'm doing is correct. I'm going to stick on this path, and my morals and my ethics and my values are being tested here, right? But you know that you're on the path for yourself.
Yeah. I feel like when it comes to me, because I grew up in a rural area with people whose opinions are different than mine in a lot of ways,
Mm,
where I had to grow to the mindset of everyone's opinions are valid based upon the journey. Because none of us just think the way that we do because we're like, oh, this is the best way to think. Like, our journeys granted us certain experiences that made us believe our beliefs are the best perceptions to view life from. And when I start thinking of things that way, instead of like, oh, looking at all my experiences and expecting someone who didn't share those experiences to have my same opinion, I was like, oh, okay. So instead of this being a journey of me trying to prove to them
mm,
why I'm right,
mm,
I take that opportunity as time to explore the experiences that got them to see the way that they do. And that helps me connect with them because in those scenarios, I could be like, wow, I could see why you would form an
mm,
opinion that way
mm,
about
mm.
people who are different than you because this experience taught you that. Would you mind me if I shared one of my experiences that I had that made me see things a little differently? And not everyone is welcome to that, but I always try to make sure that I am welcoming of people when they want to share, just because one, it gives me a new perspective to see the world in, and two, it makes them a little less like scary and monster like, and I can see and connect with them on a more humane level of wow, it was just all these experiences that they went through that got them to this point. Valid point. Not the same as mine, though.
Not the same as yours, and that kind of actually leads me to asking you a question. So I had an experience last year where I took on a client who had a very different perspective on something that I'm extremely passionate about. And when that particular person said something, oh, I I could feel the blood in my body start to bubble.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, oh, I kind of, in a roundabout way, started to kind of ask questions about that, which has nothing to do with coaching, right? And I had to do a reflection afterwards, but I know, and I allowed, I think, like politics to kind of kick in, and it was a learning experience. But when you are, put into a situation as a coach where you are proposed with something that does not align with your values, do you try to find out a bit more, or do you say, no, I can't do this?
Uh, I mean, I've definitely been put in a situation where I've worked with people since I'm part of the LGBT community, and I've been put in a situation where it is very obvious that a person I'm working with is very homophobic,
Yes.
where I question, like, why did you seek me out if these are like your guided opinions of the LGBT community? And I try to look at it as like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to like shed light in a way through actions and me being here as a coach to kind of get you to see me as more of a person and less of a stereotyped person of a community. And navigating that, there was definitely times where my brain was like, I could really use this opportunity to teach this person a very important lesson. But also, it was like, okay, what I was hired for was to move them in a space of leadership. And like in my mind, any leader has to have an open mind. They have to be able to
Yeah.
work with anyone. So for me, I kind of worked through just talking about, well, a leadership, you have to understand that there are people who are going to be very different
Yeah.
than you, but you still have to be able to lead and guide them. So I continued to work with them. I didn't allow their negative opinion of the community I'm a part of to like make me cancel the contract and just wipe them off the table. But it was definitely me having I had so many triggers that I had to take note of so that I could go and work on those when I wasn't working with this client. And I was like, oh, so there's still parts of me that are triggered by people who have very different opinions about people I care about, as well as me as a person. And so I always try to take moments like that as okay, if it was something like there used to be a time where if someone said anything about my looks, like it felt like a knife through the heart because I was just like, oh my God, you think I'm not attractive? This is horrible. Whereas recently I had someone, they're like, well, you're not really that attractive. There's definitely people, and I was like, ha, that's
Oh,
funny. That's great.
are they not
That's
looking
your
at
opinion.
the same person I am? You're beautiful,
But
Ben.
thank you. But I was just like, wow, it didn't feel like a knife this time because it was
Mm.
part of a now my level of self-love didn't require someone else's like validation to where when someone threw a stab at it, I was just like, well, that's your opinion. um, but I think it's important to take note of when those types of moments come up for you so that you can go, okay, that's still a part of me that feels wounded by something. What they just said wounded me in some way. How can I examine this later when I'm not with them? Because I think it's really important as a coach to do that healing work all the time because clients take you to places you never thought you'd go. And sometimes they take you to places where you thought you were very healed and they hit that trigger. And it's like, okay, write this down. We're going to reflect on it later.
And then we're gonna call our own coaches and say, "Hi, we need a session right now."
Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, I agree. And I think because that happened early on in my experience, that's where I started to realize what type of clients I would really like to work with and what kind of clients I don't think I can.
yeah.
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 I think sometimes as coaches, like we go through trauma and we heal, and then we feel how great it is to be on the other side of trauma. And we want to go back and help people in that exact same realm, not realizing that there's still a lot of unhealed. Like we've healed enough to feel better, but we haven't healed enough to go back into that same trauma and live it with someone else. So it's important for us to, as coaches, understand because coaching should bring you to life. Like you should feel energized and excited that you get to be a part of that journey with someone. You shouldn't come out like you just relived that whole experience that you just survived.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yes, I agree. And so removing the emotion, Ben, and just going straight solutions. That's it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that it's important for people to be that self-aware because I do a lot of work where I go to churches and speak
Mm,
to educate them on LGBT people, which that requires a lot of like energy to go into that space and come out on the other side, because you aren't always welcomed with like open arms. Sometimes you're welcomed with they're holding up their like knives and
Yeah.
pitchforks and ready to like crucify you for your beliefs. But I went in with, okay, I need to make sure that I'm at my best, like the
Yeah.
absolute best version of myself, because I don't want to show up into that space and then blow and create more damage than I was helping people plant seeds to see new perspectives that maybe the church wasn't going to give them alone. And that takes a lot of work. And if you'd asked like my younger version to go back into a church and say anything about me being part of the gay community, like I would have been like, nope, absolutely not. That's terrifying. That would destroy me. That's like suicide, jumping into that type of situation.
Yeah.
But I did so much self work and self growth in that area of my life that when I hear people's opinions now, I'm just like, well, that's your opinion. And I understand through the messages you've been given that that's the opinion that you share with a lot of people in this space. But I'm here to give you a different perspective of how someone in my community feels and the things we go through because of the way that you all are seeing things. And I just hope in those spaces that I plant a little seed of thought in someone's mind where
Mhm.
if there's an LGBT person in a space where something bad could happen, that little seed grows a little bit bigger and makes that person go, oh, maybe
Maybe.
we should realize this is a person that we're talking to and not a creature that we have to send to hell.
Yeah, and I love that you say planting those little seeds, and truly, it really does come to self-awareness. And the more self-awareness we can have with ourselves, the more confident we can go into any situation.
Yeah. And I think when you get to a level where it's just like everyone has an opinion, and you don't think anyone's opinion is more right
Yeah.
or wrong than the others, it's just an opinion that has been formed and it can be changed, but you have to give the right ingredients to change an opinion.
Yeah.
And I think too often in today's world, we try to just like force people's opinions to be changed. Whereas I really think that understanding someone first is the only step you can take when you're meeting someone who has a different opinion. Because if you're at a level where you're trying to force a view on someone, any time you try to do that, it doesn't work. You can practice that with children. You know that if you try to force a child to do something, the last thing on the planet that they want to do is what you're trying to force them to do.
No, exactly. And how do we do this? Through active listening. It's so important to just listen. And I don't mean listen in a surface way. Really listen to what a person is saying, because you can pull out so much of where it is coming from, where it's stemming from, you know, how far has the person disconnected from themselves? And I mean their DNA. I, yeah, when I listen to somebody, I do sort of, kind of see how disconnected they've become from themselves, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, the active listening and really getting the underlying messages. And then, of course, that's when the questions start to happen. You know, you do become curious, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, you do. And you're like, oh, oh, I never thought of this. Where did this thought process come from? Where does this stem from? Where do your beliefs, where did they start from? It's something. It really is something to really find out where these things come from in a person. It's interesting.
Yeah. I One thing I tell people like with my coaching is like I listen to every word that you're using, because so often and people call me out all the time when it's like an area that I'm nervous about. They're like, we heard some negative words here. We heard can't. We heard this. We heard try instead of do. We heard, and when you sit there and like listen to someone, you do pick up on all those little things where it's like a belief that is sitting there really strong and holding someone back. Where it's like, well, I've done all these different things, but I can't do this because you can't. Like, what's
Right.
stopping you there? And a lot of times that's what you're looking for, is just like listening to and hearing someone tell their story, but then really picking up on the limiting beliefs that exist in that storyline. Because a lot of times that limiting belief is just from experiences in life. Like
Yeah.
maybe lots of people around us have tried to do something and failed, so that became a belief of ours that it is not possible to do this certain thing. So when we're speaking to other people, which I love what you were saying earlier about meeting people who are different than you, not
Mhm.
being surrounded by an echo chamber of people who believe the same things, is because if we live in an area where everyone's echoing the same thing, like this can't be done, you can't do this, you can only go so far, only the rich can do this, only these types of people can do that, if that's the belief and the echoes that you're getting, when you leave that and go somewhere else where that limit doesn't exist, people hear that and they're like, what are you talking about? You can't do this. All my
Yeah.
friends are doing it. Everyone I know started a business. It's really easy. Come over here. And the more you talk to those people, the more those can'ts and limiting beliefs fall off, and you start to see the things that are possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, this is again the power of coaching. It's not even life coaching or, whatever it is, but the power of coaching in itself. Because even as I speak to you, you know, I'm speaking, but I don't really hear myself necessarily the way that you are going to hear me.
Yeah.
And you will pull out blind spots, or you will pull out things that I'm saying. You'll be like, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's so great to have somebody who is different that can hear different things, because that's where the growth and the learning happens. You know, I love having a coach who's opposite of me or different than me, who can ask those tough questions, because that's what's going to really make me think, you know, oh,
Yeah.
well, I didn't realize that. Didn't realize I even said that. Oh,
Yep.
did I say that?
Yep. And it's funny because like even when it comes to like you and Stacy in spaces where like I've shared something and then you all message me and I'm like, oh, interesting. That you got that from that? Oh, interesting. And just when you connect with people on different levels that see and hear you differently because of their
Mhm,
journey that brought them to the
mhm,
same moment, it's like, oh, so we're able to kind of guide each other. And that's like when it comes to hosting seminars, where this is why I love the Jay Shetty community, because we're from everywhere. Like this
ah,
community, we do not have a background that's guiding our like mindset. We all have so many perspectives to view something from. So when it comes to hosting a seminar, I think it's great because someone over here may ask a question that this person didn't know how to ask,
mhm.
but it was sitting in here and they needed it answered. And then this person over here gives the answer that both of these people needed. And it's just like when you open yourself up to a space like that and don't go in with the belief of the way I see the world is the only way the world should function, everyone needs to
Yes.
learn how to think like me, you put yourself in a position where you're like, wow, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from people who just came in confused and lost and had questions. I was like, wow, I love that. Like, I life granted me an experience that the mountain they're climbing wasn't a mountain for me. So the lesson that they're learning, their skills that they shared with us in that space became skills that I now have when I hit my mountain over here. And I think that that's an important thing for people to realize, is like everyone can contribute, even when it's like questions and them being confused. if you listen close enough, there's tons of little nuggets being shared. You just have to have an open enough mind to hear it.
Yeah, I really realized this during our launch pad a lot, because during launch pad, I feel things shift from just being a part of the program, but the launch pad is quite different. And I love kind of being not at the top and not at the bottom. You know, I like to just stay at my sort of space that I enjoy being at. And I always called Stacy my blind spot manager. Yeah,
Love it.
yeah, because she would pull out things that I'm like, oh, right, you know, or you would pull out things. But then, the others that also that may contribute less, or they would come in and just, say one thing sometimes, you could see their hamster wheel just turning every single time. And they're the ones that actually remain silent, but they create the best stuff and then they'll come out with a bang. And so, I'm such a firm believer, like you never know who's standing beside you, and everyone has something to offer. Everybody. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be the loudest in the room, you don't have to be the quietest in the room, but everyone has something to offer and we can all learn from each other, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, if you think about the ones that are the quiet ones, and they don't say much, but they're the thinkers. They're the ones that will create stuff in the background, and all of a sudden here they are. And a lot of the times when you're the loudest in the room, you see people like that as, oh, they're not going to do anything, they're not going to achieve anything, they're not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, boom. And now the ones that are the loudest in the room, they can't handle it.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to being in a room, like you were saying that you were kind of finding yourself somewhere in the middle,
Mm,
like I always tell people, like if you're at the bottom in a room, like you feel like you have the most to learn, that's great. But make sure that you're also in another room where you feel like you're closer to the top or in the middle to where
mm,
you feel like you have something to contribute, because you don't want to sit in spaces where you feel the lowest all the time,
no.
because it will create such a mindset that you get trapped in where you feel like, well, I don't have anything to contribute. And if you're at the top, same thing. You need to go to other spaces where you're in the middle or at the bottom so that you remember that, yes, in this room, you have a lot to contribute, but there's a lot going on in this world that you have no clue about. You need to
So
keep
true.
yourself like in that mindset of, I can always grow, I can always learn more. Um, because that keeps you in a space where when you are at the top in a space, that you're not speaking to the people who know less as if they're lesser than you. It's
Hmm.
just, in this space, I want to grant you this information because in this space over here, I know what it feels like to be at the bottom. And I've been made to feel stupid before. And I would never want to be in a position where me knowing something makes someone else feel that
Yeah.
way. So a lot of times on Launchpad, I might have shared something because I've got so many years of coaching, but I also wanted people to know, like, hey, I mess up all the time.
Yeah.
There are times where I fell flat on my face and life taught me a really important lesson. And I am more than willing to share that with people just because I want people to know that life's a journey
It
and
is.
no one's better than anyone else. Maybe in this topic, I've got a lot to say, but stick me in a different room on another topic, I'm the one at the bottom sitting there like taking
Yeah.
notes and going, "Oh my gosh, I know nothing. Tell me more."
That's like me and AI. You know, I can be confident in areas and people are like, "Oh my God, you have it all together. You have your life together." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding?" Maybe in three areas, out of that whole entire wheel of life, maybe three areas, but I do focus on those three areas and then build on the strengths. But it's funny, I learned this from the brand that I work for, and how, pre-COVID, I raised the brand in number one. Number one. And I did it within a year because it was a goal of mine and I did it. And then when I hit number one, I'm like, where do I go from here? Where do I go? What do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, and then boom, the crash. And then you got to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild. And so, I think there's pros and cons of that, being on the bottom, being on the top, this and that. No, just focus on you and your journey and, the things that feel good for you. And, again, reconnect with yourself, your
Yeah.
vision, your mission. What is that? You know?
Yeah. I've definitely had to like humble myself multiple times in life where like I was super successful somewhere, and being successful sometimes I think starting over and doing something new where you're not the best is one of the hardest things to overcome. Like, you have to teach yourself to constantly be doing new things and being bad
Yeah.
at something, because when you excel at something and you get praise for it and like people build you up and trust you and all these things, like you don't want to lose that. So like you go into this new space expecting yourself to have like this level of expertise that you had over here,
Yeah.
and it's like, no. And I've pointed that out to many people because I had to overcome that, where it's like, it's okay to be a hot mess over here trying to do this thing for the first time. Like, and I used to try to hide that. Like, when I'd mess
Mhm.
up, I'd try to do it in the shadows with behind closed doors, and I was never able to get better because I was trying to grow by myself, make mistakes by myself, and teach myself something I didn't have the tools to teach myself.
All right.
Whereas if I look back and see these areas of success and look where I first started, I was so open to tell people, God, I don't know what I'm doing. Gosh, this is so hard. And people showed up and they're like, hey, here's a tool. Have you tried this? But because I was such an expert here, when I moved to this new place where I wasn't an expert anymore, I had to give myself permission again to be openly bad and just be like, I
Yeah.
suck. And the same people started showing back up to help again, but you have to be able to be brave enough to say, I don't know how to do this.
Yes. Which can be hard and difficult to do. But I think that people love vulnerability.
Yeah.
They do. And again, it's like checking in with your ego, realizing, okay, you're not the smartest in the room, right? And everyone does have something to offer. But I love that you say that because it's a really great reminder. It is a great reminder, Ben, that it's okay to not always know everything. You don't have to always know everything. It's okay to learn and relearn and learn again and fall and pick yourself up and try again at any given moment, you know?
Yeah. You just have to like teach yourself to enjoy that. Like,
Yes.
I think once you experience success, like that feels so great that like you're like, well, all of that hard stuff was worth it because I've obtained the success. And then you're like, well, I don't want to go back and do all that hard stuff again. But like it's important, and if I could go back and do something differently, I would slowly implement new things all the time to where
Mm.
I built up that like tolerance to that fear of being new at something. Like, as you grow things, like you should have that focus there, but then try something new along the way and kind of have that like motion of growth instead of getting super good at one thing all the way over here and then starting something new feels like you have to jump off of a cliff to
Yeah.
start back over. Because but and also remembering like starting over with something else, there's a lot of tools that you gained over here
Mm.
that could probably help fast track you from starting over here at zero and kind of get to like 20, whereas like last time it took you like 3 years to get to 20. maybe it takes 2 weeks this time because you're using knowledge over here to help you with this new goal that you're setting for yourself. But you definitely have to get over the being bad at something and starting, which it's scary. And I will tell you right now, it took me a while to get past that. And it took coaches forcing it in my head to stop thinking I have to be perfect at something, because that was my biggest crutch, was like, well, I don't want to do it or present it to the world that I'm doing it unless I'm presenting something perfect, which we all know that that's no such
Oh,
thing.
yeah. And you know, I had that mindset too, you know, where if you haven't experienced it, how do you know? Or if your life isn't perfect, how are you going to help me? And I struggled with that actually at the beginning of the program, because I felt that I had to perfect this whole life coaching thing by the time I graduate, or else I'm going to completely be a failure at it.
Yeah.
And then connecting with other coaches, and you know, coaches that have been doing this for a while like yourself, or you know, listening to the bigger coaches in the world, um and how they still you know, have their own struggles, and they have their coaches and they have their mentors, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, no, it is okay. But you have to train your mind though, because I would do that. No, it's okay. No, it's not. Oh, yes, it is. No, 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 no. And I'm like, no, it is okay.
Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins' episode of his podcast last night, their second episode, because I know that they've done two, maybe even three now. But he was talking about like wanting to do acting because that was a part of himself that he really enjoyed back when he was younger. And one of the fears that came up was if he goes into acting, people may
Mm,
lose respect for him as a coach,
mm,
because they're like, oh, so he's an actor, he's not a coach. And it's like that limiting mindset of thinking that if you're bad at something or do something else, that you will lose success or lose like respect from people in another realm. It's so sad that that's like where our minds go, and that's what we're taught. But we are hearing it. We do hear. I always tell people to like monitor what you say negatively about the world and try to bring
mm.
as much of that back in and keep it until it can come out in a better way, because you never know what limiting belief you lay on someone when you say, oh, so this model thinks she can be an actress now. Plot, that's out
Yeah,
there now. All these people who are like, well, I was modeling but acting's my passion, then they're like, well, I better not do that because people are going to hate me, I better stay in my lane. And
yeah.
stuff like that always falls out of our mouths, and a lot of times it's out of our own limiting beliefs, and we spit that out to like get people to confirm that so that we don't feel as nasty and gross inside. But a lot of times that's where our limiting beliefs grow from, is when someone pukes all over us with their limiting
Mhm,
beliefs. And it's just
mhm.
like, we don't want to be hated. We want to be connected and loved and accepted. So when we hear stuff like that, we start to like close ourselves in to prevent from being disliked from people.
You know, as you're saying this, you know what, like everything that's coming up for me is the social media. So you and I have talked about this before, about
Yeah.
my love-hate relationship with social media.
Yeah.
Yep. And, and so I had to really build up an intentional relationship with social media and how I'm going to show up on social media. But I think about the last 10 years of my life and how my voice has been silenced, you know, or how maybe I've silenced myself, or, you know, whatever the case may be. And if I could have done something differently in the last 10 years, it would have been to probably not stop saying what I have to say on social media. And so, yes, so you know, I had to think about this love hate relationship that I have, and where is it stemming from? And it does, I think, a bit of it come back to where I actually stopped myself from, you know, putting myself out there. And I think like I was angry at myself actually, you know, for not continuing what I actually started.
Yeah.
Because what stopped me over the 10 years from putting out positive messaging? Who stopped me?
Yeah.
Right? You know, yeah, it's definitely interesting, you know, to think about the limited beliefs and what we believe to be true and what we think, or or listening to what other people think we should or shouldn't be. Oh, you can't say that, right? And now when I sit here 10 years later, I'm like, oh no, I can say that.
Yes.
I will say that.
Oh, I will fill your cup with so much positive that it's going to overflow. Get ready for it.
Yeah. And people will love it or they will just, they can't stand it. You know, it's like when you see, when you're driving and you see someone and they're walking across the street and they're so, they have a big smile on their face and you're like, what are they so happy about?
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, that's how people, it's funny though, because it doesn't seem to like compute to people that if you put attention to those types of things, because so many people share so much negative
Yeah.
stuff. And the internet is full of it because it gets the clicks, it gets the views. And I'm like, you can do the same thing for the positive things. Like, people watch my story and they're like, your story always brightens my day.
It does.
I'm like, anytime I see something positive, I'm like, I have to throw it further. I want more people to see it. Throw it a little bit further, because so many people go, oh my God, this person hates this person, share that post so that the world can see it. And I'm like, stop. You're giving them a platform to spread hate. Like,
Yeah.
find your friends that are small and trying to use their platform to do something good in the world and throw it even further. Even if you only have 20 followers, you're throwing their message to 20 people they might not have connected with because they're not friends with those people. And
Yeah.
it kind of has like that skipping effect of like going to the next community and the next one. And I think that that's a beautiful thing people have to remember, because the internet only gives you what you push forward, and so many people are pushing the negative. I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what, 2020, I was like, I'm not sharing a single negative thing about the political party I'm against. I'm going to share every positive thing that reinforces why I think this person should be the next president of the United States, why these people should be the next elected politicians in this state. Because there are so many people who are like, what's the use? All of them are horrible, because everyone's just sharing the horrible journey of people. And it's like, give someone something to believe in, because there is tons of good in the world, but the only thing we hear about is the evil and the bad. So it's just like, tons of people don't vote. Tons of people are like, well, I'm voting for the lesser of two evils. I'm like, do you know of all the good things that are happening? Yes,
Oh,
politics
God,
can be
Ben.
rough, but you can definitely find a better thing to share for sure.
Where were you for me during the last US election? I live in Canada and I am so invested in the US politics. Oh my God.
Oh,
And I'm telling you what I put out there. Oh, and it was the same thing though for the Canadian elections too. I get very mouthy, you know, but I get very passionate about certain things, Ben. But no, you're right. You're right though, because the algorithm definitely feeds you what you uh what you don't want to see, but it is what you're seeing because that's what you're looking for. You know, I it took me so long to get narcissism and narcissists off my explore page and turn everything into panda bears. I turned everything into panda bears. Yeah, the majority of
love
what
it.
I see now is panda bears, and it took
Oh,
so long.
I love it. See, see, for me, being part of the LGBT community and being a gay man, it took me forever to get naked men off of my suggested page.
I love it.
Because like it's sitting there, oh, he's gay. What he wants to see are 200 naked
Yeah.
men in their speedos. Like the amount of having to comment and like on life coaching stuff and following all of those. I finally got it to where my story is mostly like inspiring messages, and I'm like, let's share this forward because the internet's gonna
Oh
think I'm gay and
my
throw
God.
these pictures back on my page if I don't.
Okay, so now you said it on your live in front of everyone, and now we know why you're posting so much on your story because you need to change your algorithm. So if you, the day that you stop posting on your stories is when we will all know that those pictures have finally disappeared.
We revamped my feed. We're good
Yeah.
now. Awesome. Well, I see that we're at the end of the hour, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation. I really enjoyed it. And if there's anything that we can do to help serve you and the goals that you have for yourself, please let us know. We'd love to hear it.
Well, I thank you so much. It's always so great to see you. I love the time that I get to spend with you or talk to you. I just find you so empowering and enriching, and I love this coach talks that you have. It's just such an amazing platform. And if there's anything that I can say is just keep living your true authentic self. Stay close to your DNA, stay closely connected to your soul, and don't listen to the naysayers or anyone that is going to tell you that you cannot do something. So that is my message of the day.
I love it. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and we will definitely stay connected, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.